Hello everybody. In this video I want to showcase how you can use Poly to build an end-to-end event-based integration. So normally when you start an event-based integration, you probably want to understand both sides of the equation so that you understand, hey, what am I building? Because I don't have control over the event that I'm receiving, nor the underlying enterprise system I'm dealing with. So we'll start off by first taking a look at the event we'll receive, then the underlying API, then we'll build our logic in the middle. So in this case, I'm integrating with partner number one. That's the name of my partner system I'm integrating with. And I'm also, somebody's also gone ahead and registered that webhook with Poly. So I'm playing the role of somebody who's strictly building the business logic of the integration. I'm not responsible for, introducing new systems to Poly in this case. In a future video, I'll show you how to register webhooks and how to train new APIs to Poly. So here I'll say something like, how do I receive an order from partner one? And Poly goes off, takes a look in our catalog, and sees if there's any event handling functions that have been registered for it. So you can see that it did find a on order created event, and it's gone ahead and given me an example here. So I can go ahead and copy this example. I'll paste it into my file that I created for the purpose of building this integration. And I'll make just a few modifications. Instead of logging everything as a separate item, which is kind of nice if you want to see the true details of it, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of be lazy. And I'm just going to go ahead and, let's see, I'm just going to log straight the order, which is the event, the headers, and the params. And so at this point here, I'll go ahead and just run this integration. And all we've done is basically set up an event handler that's now waiting for the Poly server to be notified of an event. Again, there's an URL that Poly creates at the time of registering the event. So this assumes that somebody's already either given that to the partner, or if you're that person, you'll see in a future video how you can do that. But at this point, the partner system has the information necessary to fire off. So for that, I'll use Postman. You might use a different system. You might use an actual UI that has a test capability or some way to do it. But here's where you fire off the event. We see a 201 coming back from Poly, and we can see that we sent it to a specific endpoint in Poly that was generated at the time of registering the event. And we can see that we received an event inside our console here. So it looks like the params is just an empty object, and then the headers is a set of headers coming, in this case, from Postman, and we can see the object that we have to work with for the event payload. Now, let's understand the other side of the equation, which we also don't have any control over, which has also been registered to Poly. So I can then say something like, how do I create an order in our logistics system? And here Poly goes off to look for that right function, and let's see what it finds. So it says, great, we've got this create order function that looks something like this. So while this code is syntactically correct, being an experienced Poly developer, I have my preferences on how I want to use it. So I'm actually going to just do something slightly different. I'm going to declare a new function, an async function, for creating, let's say, create order from partner one. And in here, I'm just going to go ahead and accept an event. And I don't need the headers or params in this case, so I'm just going to go ahead and omit those. But I do want to inherit the event object model. I want to have my event be strongly typed. So for that, I can actually introspect this function, the on order created, and I can see that we get this event, which technically is optional, that basically matches this naming convention. So here I can actually strongly type my event to be that. And in my case here, I also want to basically just return a status code. So I'm not actually going to have any payload response. I'm just going to have a status code response. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is going to be promise void. And that's going to be basically the interface to my function. Now in here, I am going to go ahead and copy some of this code that this AI agent generated for us. So I'll go ahead and actually copy pretty much all of it, except the then statement. So I'll go ahead and copy this. So I'll close the AI, thank you for your help, and then I'll take it from here. Now, one thing I'm noticing immediately is that my e-commerce is not imported, so I'll go ahead and import that. And then I'll also import Vari while I'm at it, so I can use it for credentials and things of that sort. So now, instead of this just logging, I'm actually going to have it call my function here, which is going to be create from order from partner 1, and I'm just going to pass it the event. So I've basically linked together now our webhook handler that's going to receive the event with my custom function that I'm going to basically use to process this event. So here I'm going to do some of the mapping. I could actually ask the AI to propose a mapping. So I could say propose a mapping between the on order created event and the what is this thing called? Oh, create order, the logistics create order function. And we'll see how it does. It does a pretty good job. Many times, especially if it's a big, complicated payload, it can definitely save you some time. However, I would encourage you to double check its work and not just blindly trust that it did the mapping. You might also want to make sure things are type saved. So you might want to go copy the model, give it to the AI and say, hey, make sure this mapping is type saved and it counts for optional fields, etc. So here we could see that it's gone ahead and mapped some of this information. And I'll go ahead and just borrow some of it as we go. So another thing I'd like to do here is open up my tree view where I can see some helpful functions and credentials to work with. So for example, for the host URL, I'm going to go ahead and copy the host URL from the configuration and just inject that. For the access token, I'm actually going to use a different function. So I'll go ahead and insert another statement here to say const access token, response, and I'm actually going to get that from our auth function to get a token. I'll paste that in here. Now this auth function is going to use the host URL, which we already have. It also wants a client secret, so we'll inject that. It wants a client ID, so we'll go ahead and inject that as well. And then lastly, it wants scopes. So from reading the documentation, I know that this is order create, but you're also welcome to create Vari entries for different scopes so that people don't even have to learn exactly what they need. Or in the token function, you can have a link to a page that explains the different scopes. So you have a lot of flexibility there. So in this case, I just know I need order create. And then my access token is actually going to be the response from that function dot data dot access token. Now again, I'm writing just the golden path here, so you want to make sure that, hey, if I get a successful message of a 200, then map it. If not, throw an error. So there's a lot to make this code much more robust, but I'm just showing you the golden path to give you an idea of what it looks like to program with Poly. And hopefully you're already seeing it, that Poly is just interwoven with regular development. It's just kind of this library that makes regular development easier. It does not change anything about best practices of coding, how you create, manage, etc. All of this code. So now we have our access token. Now let's go ahead and map the customer object. So we can see that this function takes in two objects. One is a customer, one is an order line items, and then it goes ahead and assembles that together to create the order. So let's see what it recommended here. For the customer name, it recommended event underscore customer name. So let's see if that holds what true, and that looks pretty good. And again, this is nice because we've declared that this event is this underlying model, and that's what allows IntelliSense to even have these options available. So you can see, for example, if I do event dot, you can see these different properties. And you can see that the customer age is optional, but the customer name is not. So a lot of power there. For the address, let's see here what we have. So this is an illustration on purpose where address is not actually in the model. So you might encounter the situation where the actual payload has something that the model doesn't. And what that means is that the person who registered this function did not account for this potential element. So I would call this a bug in the event registration that could be easily fixed doing a patch to Poly, but this is going to happen. So just note that the type definitions are based off of the examples that you gave Poly at the time of training. However, at runtime, it's not like Poly fails or doesn't allow you as a developer the ability to kind of override these models that are just really meant to be helpful. So here I can then say, hey, I want the event dot address to be included here. Now, this is kind of an unfortunate situation that is going to happen. So we have a few choices here that we can do. We can either modify the underlying model to add the address into it, or you can do an assertion in here to basically override it. So I'm doing this to just demonstrate the fact that we're not changing the nature of programming at all. We're just trying to be as helpful as possible, and sometimes there are going to be kind of minor discrepancies which you're going to encounter. So I'm going to go ahead and do it as an assertion. So I'll just say event as any, and that's going to allow us to basically force the compiler to overlook the fact that this delivery address is not in the model. Now, for delivery instructions, we don't have anything, so we don't want to basically hard code it in there. And one other thing to just note is, just like we map the event here, we can do the same thing for the actual objects, and that's actually a best practice. So let's go ahead and do that to kind of make our application more type safe. So within this function here, we can actually go to the definition, and we can see that we do have models for both a customer and a line item. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to declare the customer as this object type. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the line items. And this is really just to make sure that I'm keeping my application as safe as possible to reduce the amount of errors and chance of problems I have. So now I've gone ahead and declared it. And now when I hover over delivery instructions, we can see any additional instructions for the carrier when leaving the package, and we can see that it's actually optional. So since it's optional, I'm going to go ahead and omit it, and we're not going to have that be mapped in our integration. Now looking at order line items, we can take a look and see that, hey, there is a product ID, which our model here, so let's do it like this, but let's remove the toString real quick. And then it looks like it's actually creating an iteration through this. So I actually like this better because instead of mapping out just two, it's going to map out all of them. So here's an example where the AI's kind of saved me some time. I can go ahead and copy this, and I'll go ahead and paste this. And then I'll go ahead and still grab my object type so that I have the type safety benefit. Oops. So we'll still go ahead and declare this array as this object model. And so now we have a map which iterates through every item and maps it. So I'd like to point out here real quick that the product ID is supposed to be a string, and that we detected that the item ID alone is a number, right? So the AI has actually gone ahead and done the conversion for us by adding this toString. However, the quantity is a number on both sides of the equation, so it doesn't require any type conversion. And then customizations is a property which, again, inside our model we can take a look at, and we can see that customizations is also optional as a string. However, in our object model for the event, which is this one right here, we don't actually have anything that implies a customization. So this is just another one of those attributes that we'll have to lose when we do the conversion. And this is going to happen because the probability that both systems have everything exactly the same is very unlikely. So there is going to be some information loss inside the integration. And then the last step here is to create the order. So I'm going to go ahead and do a const order create response and have it set to this one. And here we can see it implicitly assumes the type of the response. And what we're going to do here at the end is we're just going to go ahead and log the status. So this is the code coming back, and I should actually do an await here. So let's go ahead and clean this up. Great, so let's go ahead and do a trial run. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to clear it, and we'll go ahead and run it again. And so now we're waiting for the event, and we will execute all of this code here that we've written when the event comes through. So let's go ahead and trigger our event again. So I'll go ahead and hit send, and then we see a 201 happening from the underlying order create function. So an end-to-end, one-directional integration. So we have the integration logic. We could technically deploy this now inside our own Node.js application, similar to the one that's running on my laptop here, or we can level it up to have it be a server function. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to take this integration and then deploy it to the Poly server runtime and how to configure it to basically run on Poly. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.